Pete, it's good to talk with you. How you doing?
Good. What's going on, guys? How are you?
We're excited. Jags, Rams, 4-2 versus 4-2. What do you think is the big element to this game?
Well, the offensive line better be better than it was a week ago. It was awful. And I know Monheim's not in the lineup this week. He might have been the best offensive lineman last week. They were bad. I mean, the left side was really bad, and Walker Little was terrible. I thought Cleveland had his worst game. The right side wasn't much better. McCary had some problems. And, Monheim maybe blew a couple calls because obviously there was some more pressure than we thought they would be giving up. But he was at least physical and was good in the run game. I think there's a major issue there. They got to show up this week against a good Rams front, or else they're going to have problems again.
Yeah, the offensive line, Pete, clearly the worst game they've played all year, no doubt about that. And as you can imagine, here in Jacksonville, a lot of football fans have football PTSD from 15 years of just awfulness for the most part. And the big question to me is, last week against Seattle, was that a reality check for the Jaguars, or was that a bad day at the office? Maybe we'll find out this Sunday at Wembley Stadium.
Well, when you looked at it, though, they did a decent job in the run game on defense. They gave up a couple big plays, and you can't give those up, and that was a problem. There was no pass rush either. Now, Trayvon Walker with the club on his hand, that's tough ask of a guy, but he's got to get used to that if he's going to play, and he's got to be more productive than what he was. So, I think, Hacker, you go back to last week, it was just so bad on both lines in terms of no pressure and allowing pressure and not being able to protect your quarterback. And you can't win games consistently in the league that way. And now, you look at it, it's time for them to get after the quarterback a little bit more than what they have.
The Rams won't have Puka Nacua. Who do you think the Jaguars should have on their radar outside of Devontae Adams?
Well, they're not a very fast team. That's my biggest criticism of the Rams is they're not fast. Even when Nacua is in the lineup, it's not a fast team. Adams is a great route runner, not fast. Nacua, crafty, smart, knows how to get open, knows how to sit down in zones, but he's not fast. And so Atwell is a guy they think, and Sean McVay said even last year at the owners' meetings that they got to get him more involved in the offense and get some big plays because he's the one guy that can run. So I'd keep an eye on him in this offense because I do think he can provide the speed element. But again, with no Nacua on the lineup, it really changes the way they play, and it puts a lot of pressure on them to kind of spread that ball around a little bit more. The guy's been targeted so many times and been such a big part of what they do. And as far as Adams, it just doesn't look like they're in rhythm yet the way they will be at some point. But missing Nacua is a big hit for them.
Pete Prisco, CBS Sports, with us here on 1010XL and 92.5 FM in Jacksonville. Pete, Travis Hunter last week, 4 catches for 15 yards. One of those catches went for 11, so the other 3 combined for 3 yards. That obviously has to change. You got to get the ball to him down the field, something they have not been willing to do. Do you expect that to change this week?
Well, they have to. I mean, if you use the assets you use to go get him, and the whole idea was he's going to play on both sides of the ball, and he's been really good at corner, by the way. I don't think he's getting enough credit for how good he's been at corner. But you got to get involved in the offense, and not just bubble screens and quick throws. Get him down the field. You saw it a couple times on, some over routes. One underthrow a couple weeks ago that was picked off. But I think they got to get him involved in the passing game. And I think when you start talking about it the way they talked about it this week, I think you're going to see that happen. And enough with the little quick throws on the sideline. Get him down the field, in the middle of the field. Let him use that speed and create matchup problems for a team because this Rams defense, not great on the outside with the corners. So I think they're beatable there.
Pete, let's get your thoughts on some of these other games. It's a big week in terms of great matchups in the NFL. Let's start with the Colts going to the Chargers. How do you see this game playing out?
Well, it's a prove-it game for the Colts. There's no question about that. And you look at their schedule. Beat the Dolphins, beat the Titans, beat the Raiders, and beat an Arizona team that didn't have their quarterback. I mean, so they beat the Broncos and lost to the Rams, but they probably should have won that game against the Broncos and maybe should have won the game against the Rams. But the reality is they haven't played a tough schedule. This is a prove-it game for me, at least from my standpoint, to see if they can continue to be who they are so far. And it's a tough ask, and I think the Chargers will find a way to win that game because I think Justin Herbert will have another big day throwing the football around.
The Colts' schedule, particularly the road schedule, is brutal. It starts this week with the Chargers. They still have to go to Arrowhead. They got to go to Seattle. They got to go to Pittsburgh. They got to come here, and they got to go to Houston. It is wild how easy they've had it, how rough they're going to have it moving forward. Pete, another one's the Houston Texans. They go out to Seattle, kind of a weird game, 10 o'clock on the East Coast, 9 o'clock Central, Houston time on Monday night. And you look at the Texans' next four, the only road game is Seattle, but then they come home for San Francisco, Denver, and Jacksonville. So we'll find out a lot about the Texans over the next month as well.
Yeah, and their schedule is really tough. I mean, if you look at it and play it all out the rest of the way, it's a brutal schedule. With that offensive line, I don't know how they're going to come out from underneath what they've done. And you guys saw that Seattle defensive line last week. That, to me, looks like a mismatch. I will be astounded if they don't put them on the ground at least 5-6 times in that game. And when you can't get into any rhythm offensively, I think that's going to be a problem for them. So I think Seattle's the real deal, by the way. That defense, they didn't have their secondary players last week. And when those guys get back, that defense is going to be tough to move the football on, and they can rush the passer. And they can throw it down the field. In a league where nobody's doing it, they are. And I think that's a team to watch. But I think they beat the Texans on Sunday.
Incredible.
Or Monday.
Yeah, incredible game last night. What did you make of Cincinnati upsetting Pittsburgh?
Well, Pittsburgh's defense was awful. And when you have old guys playing in that defense, particularly in the secondary, on a short week against those receivers, that's going to show up. They were terrible on defense. And you know what? They came into the game, the Bengals came into the game with the longest run from scrimmage being 13 yards, and they ran on them. It was just a bad showing by the Steelers' defense, and that to me is concerning. And, you know, their schedules gets a little tougher here coming up, and you look at the Bengals, their schedule's easier in the next couple of weeks. If you look at the Bengals' schedule, it wouldn't shock me to see them win the next 2 weeks, next two games, and get to 5-4 on the season and be in the mix. And all of a sudden, Joe Burrow might be coming back. They got the Jets on the 28th, and then they got the Bears at home on the 2nd. No, the Bears isn't an easy game before they go back to Pittsburgh on the 16th. So, look, the bottom line is that division, which looked like Pittsburgh might put a hammerlock on it last night, far from over.
Couple of more for Pete Prisco, CBSSports.com. Pete, we saw the first firing in the NFL this week. Brian Callahan, 4-19 in Tennessee. He's shown the door. Will that be the only firing of the season, or will we see more, particularly maybe in Miami with Mike McDaniel?
I think you're going to see more. I think Miami's coming. I think that one's going to come. Look, I'm not a big believer in firing guys during the season. I really don't think it does much. But you saw that mess last week when Jeffrey Simmons came out and said the practices weren't good. I mean, he was basically indicting the coach. They almost had no choice to make that decision. But when you look at Miami, I don't think he wants to fire him, but he's getting fired whether it's during the season or after the season. There's no question about that. That place is a mess. You have Tua calling out his teammates publicly, which he should have never done. Kind of indicted the entire team without naming anybody. When you do that, you throw a whole blanket over the roster. That's bad. And so there was no discipline in on that roster for the last couple of years. And they thought they got rid of Ramsey, and now Tyreek is hurt. Maybe it would be better. Well, it's not. So I think Miami will have a coaching change. Whether it comes during the season, I'm not sure. And by the way, the GM will be blown out finally as well.
Wow. What do you think about Tampa Bay going to Detroit?
I wish they both were healthy. It's just the Lions are banged up in the secondary, and the Bucs are banged up everywhere on the offense. I mean, I just wish they were healthy. And what Baker Mayfield has done is incredible. Last week, he was throwing the receiver 5, 6, and 7. They said on the broadcast, 4, 5, and 6. No, it was 5, 6, and 7. He didn't have Ibuka, he didn't have Evans, he didn't have McMillan, and he didn't have Godwin. And he's thrown to a bunch of guys and really making plays. And then the offensive line, they haven't started their offensive line not one time this entire season, and they won't because the right guard's out for the year. So I think what Baker Mayfield has done is incredible. I think that one will get loose and high scoring. I think in the end, though, the Lions at home might find a way to win that one late.
Pete, final one from me. We've seen a lot of trades already in the NFL. The trade deadline is approaching, I believe, on November the 4th. The Jaguars have made some news recently, renegotiating some contracts or doing things to clear up some room. I think $12 million in room for 2025. What are you hearing league-wide about how active it'll be, and what are your thoughts on Jacksonville maybe pulling off another trade or two in the next couple of weeks?
Well, I think Jacksonville should look at calling the Cardinals on Calais Campbell, which they almost, remember, they made a run at him last year. They should call the Dolphins on Zach Sealer. If the Ravens lose before the trade deadline, they should call on Mark Andrews as a potential tight end because Strange is out of there. I think those are some of the guys you should definitely do your due diligence on to try and find some help. I still think they need defensive tackle help. There aren't a lot of guys around the league that you would, that are going to be available because some teams still think they're in it when they really aren't. So I think that might change the way they look. But that's what I would do if I were Jacksonville. Calais Campbell, look, if the Cardinals are done, and we don't know if they are, we don't know how they see it, he'd be perfect to come back to Jacksonville for the first stretch run. I think it would make a lot of sense. Same for Zach Sealer. His contract isn't that bad. He would make a lot of sense if Miami's, going to host a garage sale. So I think those are two guys I would keep an eye on if I were the Jaguars. And then as far as, wide receiver, they might nose around some of that some more because I still think they're not fully on board with having Travis Hunter play as much as he has so far.
Yeah, Pete, we'll get you out on this one. How do you think it goes in Wembley for the Jaguars?
I think they win the game. I think that offense is different without Puka Nacua. And by the way, the Ravens' defense going into last week was horrendous. I mean, just awful. And were it not for a goal line stand, they might have beat the Rams, who didn't do a lot on offense. I think the one thing that bothers Jacksonville is teams that can get down the field, and you saw that with Smith and Jigba last week. I don't think the Rams do, and for that reason, I think Jacksonville will find a way to win the game.
How about that? What kind of you think? Low scoring, high scoring? How do you see it?
Yeah, I forget what I picked it, but I just think when you look at it, I think Jacksonville's got to at some point, and this is just me. At some point, they got to crank that offense up. And I get it, the offensive line matters and all that, but I think at some point they got to crank the offense up. 24-20, 24-21, something like that.
All right, great stuff, Pete. We certainly appreciate it. We'll look forward to talking with you next Friday.
You got it. Take care, guys.
Hey, y'all, Lauren Brooks here. Thanks so much for watching 1010XL Jaguars on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, and check out all of our great videos and channels on the 1010XL network.